My name is Josh Lipson. I'm with Alpine Brokerage. Thanks for taking a few minutes out of your busy day to join us. Very excited for today's webinar. We're going to go over the all-new Lincoln MoneyGuard VUL, officially known as, give me one second, officially known as MoneyGuard Market Advantage. Lincoln is once again revolutionizing long-term care planning with this first-of-its-kind VUL solution. For the first time ever, market participation, growth, and tax efficiency are all combined into one long-term care solution. Today, our guest is Glenn Usher and his partner, Steve Denton. Glenn is Sales Vice President of Long-Term Care on Lincoln Financial's MoneyGuard team. Glenn is a tremendous partner to Alpine, as is Steve. Their focus is on helping registered rep and financial professionals sell long-term care solutions that reduce the impact of long-term care expenses on their clients' assets and legacy. He received a Bachelor of Science in Accounting and a Master's of Business Administration and Finance from Rowan, holds Series 663 and his insurance license, as well as his certification in long-term care. Today, Glenn's going to go over the importance of long-term care planning, both to your clients and to your business, MoneyGuard VUL Market Advantage, and the types of clients to look for that this product could fit. Today's presentation will be recorded, so I'm going to ask you to write down your questions and reach out to us here at Alpine afterward so that we don't interrupt the recording. With that, I'll turn it over to Glenn and let him take it from here. Thanks, Glenn.
Excellent, Josh. Thank you so much. And thank you folks for joining the call today. As Josh alluded to, we're going to spend a good amount of time talking about the need for long-term care planning. But I think today, what I'm most excited about, particularly with this product, is, an avenue to engage clients in the conversation that doesn't have to be the doom and gloom of what long-term care is. So, viewing this from a planning standpoint and looking at it in the context of, how they're doing their other retirement planning, some of the investment vehicles that they're already using. This is the first of its kind solution, meaning it is an absolute game changer. And what's exciting for me is the fact that there are some industry publications out there that have kind of latched onto this as well, because for the first time ever, there's a long-term care solution that both provides access to the markets and provides the tax efficiency. So as far as what we're going to cover today, I'll briefly touch on the why plan for LTC, both from a client standpoint, but certainly from a practice management standpoint. I'm going to dive into how this product works and how it's different than some of the other solutions that are out there in the marketplace. And then a little bit more holistically, what separates MoneyGuard apart from some of the other long-term care carriers that you might see out there in the marketplace. So let's start with the basics, why it's important to plan for long-term care. I think it's probably more important to focus on what long-term care is, because there are a number of misconceptions out there as far as what qualifies as a healthcare claim or what qualifies as a long-term care claim. So a long-term care or a chronic illness is dictated by the inability to do 2 of those 6 activities of daily living. So if somebody's questioning, well, what does it take to go on claim, or how do I receive benefits? Every qualified long-term care policy will check the box on this. It's either a severe cognitive impairment, so think of that Alzheimer's or dementia diagnosis, or it's the physical inability to do 2 of those 6 activities of daily living. And those 6 activities are, those activities that I think we all wake up and in the first 10, 15 minutes of our day, we check the box on almost every one of them. So they are truly activities that you're doing day in and day out. So being unable to do 2 of those 6 is what would trigger a potential long-term care claim. When we're talking about why the need to put a plan in place, it doesn't always have to be, going down the path of, well, should we buy insurance or not? But I think another misconception about long-term care, A, is that their health insurance is going to cover it, and it does not. And B, how much long-term care might ultimately end up costing, and the impact that would have both financially as far as the portfolio, and then certainly the impact from an emotional standpoint of the family when a plan is not in place, and then the family is left scrambling and put that plan together. So at a very high level, this is going to be very dependent on the actual portion of the country where a client is living or where they plan on retiring. Different states will have a different cost of care. So what we're looking at here are the cost of care among 3 different care settings. So we're looking at home health care is about 80 grand a year. If you're assuming a 60-hour work week at $25 per hour, depending on the level of care needed, if you need a home health aide, that'll be about $25 an hour. Registered nurse going to be significantly more. A lot of the folks that we're having conversations with likely will need more than 60 hours per week to have somebody coming out to assist. So these are all ballparks, but I think, most folks will recognize, maybe they can fund 6 months or even a year or even a couple years out of pocket if a long-term care event presents itself. But when you look at some of the cognitive related claims like Alzheimer's and dementia and some of those claims that might stretch out 4, 5, 6, 10 years, those costs can add up substantially, and clients are forced to make decisions rather than enacting the plan that they had already put in place. So financially speaking, how does a long-term care claim impact somebody's portfolio? From an emotional standpoint, the family usually is the one that has to pick up the brunt of care. Most folks have a story. My story is, my mom taking care of my grandmother after my grandfather passed away. My grandfather, up until that point, was my grandmother's caregiver. She needed care for about 10 years with her Alzheimer's diagnosis. My grandfather was the primary caretaker. When he had his cancer diagnosis, my mom then became both of their primary caretakers, had to take time away from work. So the financial impact isn't just paying for care, it's everything else that goes into it and how that family is impacted from a long-term care claim. Financially speaking, on average, the safe or the withdrawal rate from a retirement portfolio jumps from 5%, which I think by some estimations is already probably too high as far as that safe withdrawal, all the way up to 11%. And keep in mind, this is typically happening on the back end of clients' retirement when they might already be financially strained as far as their income levels lasting that long. So planning helps both protect the savings, protect the retirement portfolio. From an emotional standpoint, it helps protect the family, so they're not the ones that are having to make some of those decisions and figure out where mom or dad needs care or how are we going to pay for it.
Hey,
Sure,
Glenn, Josh. Yeah, you know what else it protects? Your rear end as a financial advisor, right? As a registered rep, where you've got to have these conversations with clients, right? You've got to talk to them about long-term care. You've got to have notes in your file. One thing that I know we're big on at LifeMark is, a process, right? A plan, a process, documentation. And this is a conversation that every one of you should have with every one of your clients as they approach retirement. One, because you have to help them with this risk. Two, while doing so, you're going to make a living. But three, really to protect yourself against the clients who maybe don't take your advice, and then some angry children come knocking on the door, a couple years before you're ready to retire. So it protects a lot, the long-term care conversation. Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think also that's just a great way to bridge that gap between generations. I mean, we all know the stats as far as, folks that inherit wealth and then immediately move funds to a different advisor. I think, from a planning standpoint, the ability to kind of go to the kids and say, here's that plan that we put forth for your parents and engage those folks in that conversation before that, before that death happens and that relationship really needs to be fostered. I think the other part from a business planning standpoint or practice management standpoint and succession planning is, if down the line you're looking to sell your book of business someday, and two identical books as far as the assets are right next to each other, one has long-term care associated with those clients, that's a hedge against that book of business. That's going to drive the value of that business up, because if and when those clients do start filing that claim, those assets aren't walking out the door because they're already protected. So there's very much a good reason to be talking about long-term care outside of just making sure we're meeting our client needs. It is self-serving in that standpoint that we are going to be protecting our own book of business as well.
Correct. Protecting your clients' assets is also a protection of your business.
Exactly right. So, we talk about long-term care planning. I'll tell you, having worked in this space for the last 10 years, when folks think they should be thinking about long-term care planning is almost always too late, because now they're seeing their mom or dad go through it. They might already be at the point where they might not be able to be underwritten for a long-term care plan to be able to get the tax efficiencies and the leverage. So long-term care planning is not about age, it's about stage. And that's what's most exciting about the product that we're going to talk about today is This product is really geared toward a different type of marketplace, and the entry point as far as how this conversation is going to transpire is really going to be about tax mitigation and just doing the right thing financially as it relates to retirement planning and income planning in retirement. All right, so how does it work? I'm going to talk very high level. We are going to dig into kind of how the investment component works to it. I mentioned this is the only long-term care strategy out there that provides market access, so the ability to grow a solution in a tax-free manner. And when we're talking about, if and when clients have a long-term care claim, it is up to us from a planning standpoint. If they don't want to put an insurance policy in force, or if they don't want to plan for it separately, we as planners need to know what assets they're going to liquidate first to pay for a long-term care claim and the priority of all of those assets. So I will pull up here. This is the tax control triangle. Control is underlined because the only way that you can control it is by doing the proper planning. What we see when we try to identify the assets that a client might use, or really, when folks are forced to use their own assets to fund their long-term care event, those dollars are going to be coming from, one of those three areas. It's either a taxable benefit, a tax deferred benefit. So think of, pre-tax contributions, your IRA, your 401k. If you have to liquidate stocks, CDs, checking accounts, savings accounts, there are some tax consequences there as far as capital gains, depending on where those funds are sitting. And then there are your tax advantage vehicles here. So muni bonds, Roth IRAs, 529 plan in the context of a college planning, or cash value life insurance, which is effectively what this product is that we're talking about today. But I think talking about it in the context of a tax planning conversation, because you might be able to say, hey, my client's worth $2 million, $3 million, $10 million. But when you dig into it, well, how liquid are those dollars, for one, and where are those dollars currently sitting? Because if we have to spend $200,000 a year to pay for a nursing home, you might quickly liquidate those checking accounts and savings accounts and be forced into drawing down from either the tax deferred account, paying ordinary income tax, or liquidating some of those other tax advantage funds, which were really earmarked for something else. So
then I never saw a financial plan that was done for somebody that included control that was not better than limiting yourself.
Exactly right, and that's really the story here. Is putting the plan out there allows you to control it. If you're not putting a plan out there, and whether that plan involves insurance, the plan itself, a long-term care policy like we're talking about today, is just the funding mechanism to that long-term care plan. The plan itself is everything from, how do I want to receive care, where, what care settings will I be receiving it? The funding mechanism is, well, does it make more sense to self-insure or self-fund, or are there options out there that are going to allow us to take advantage of some of the tax efficiencies that this type of plan does? So what you're seeing on the screen here, this is a very kind of simplified, boiled down version, but the impact of having money in a tax advantaged account versus a taxable account. So it's showing 100 grand growing over a 30-year period, assuming we're in a 24% tax bracket. The tax deferred account would have grown to $574,000 at the end of 30 years. The taxable account is going to grow to $381,000. So the beauty of MoneyGuard Market Advantage is we give the tax efficiencies to be able to grow in a tax-free wrapper. Granted, yes, there will be cost of insurance charges and everything else that you're going to see in a contract, but you're also seeing the tax efficiencies on the back end as well. So the reason why I talk about the tax conversation and the reason why I talk about the investment conversation first with this particular strategy is because the folks that we're talking to, think of your folks between the ages of 40 to 60 or 40 to 65. The long-term care conversation may not be a top of mind conversation to them, but the top of mind conversation that they're talking, or that they're interested in talking about day in and day out is, how do we grow our wealth as quickly as possible? So we're utilizing the financial instruments like IRAs and Roth IRAs and maxing out our 401k contributions and utilizing a 529 plan as it relates to financial planning for college. This conversation is much the same, right? So we know the likelihood that if you're talking to a husband and a wife, that one of them is going to need care is extremely high. So why not understand that the financials of it are, look, it's very likely to happen. And if it happens, we know it's going to be very expensive and likely will erode our retirement portfolio at the worst possible time at the tail end of our retirement. So talking about it and clients are probably more familiar with the investment conversation. They certainly, not every client's going to be an expert on investments, but they understand if I'm invested in the market over a long period of time, I can expect greater growth sitting there. And if I'm doing so in a tax efficient way, even better. So we have over 40 funds available inside of this MoneyGuard Market Advantage policy. Those are spread across 31 actively managed portfolios and 27 Morningstar categories. So as far as the balance of what type of funds are in there, really some type of fund in there to meet every client's risk tolerance and what their goals are. So if they want a preset portfolio allocation, we have actively managed funds, we have target date funds. If they're more on the investment savvy side or you want to build their portfolio and make those adjustments over time, a lot of fund options in there. Again, the whole idea here is contributing to a tax efficient vehicle, growing those benefits over a long period of time. If and when you need it, there is a insurance component to it, which I'll talk on the next slide as far as that. But the beauty of this strategy compared to all of the other kind of fixed hybrid strategies out there is it's not a dead asset. So we're contributing money into it, and that asset is actually growing itself. So it's growing the LTC component, it's also growing the cash value, and it's growing the death benefit. So in the event that a client never needs it for long-term care, they have a death benefit that's going to get paid out on the back end that captures all of that growth that they saw in the life of that contract onto the next generation. So a little bit of a different value proposition if you're comparing it with, let's say a fixed MoneyGuard strategy or one of the other hybrid LTC solutions out there.
Right. Glenn, those typically have, let's say a death benefit that's return of premium, maybe a few dollars more, but there's, significant potential for higher benefits based on the account value growth. Yep.
Exactly right. So, okay, so we talked about the tax efficiencies. We talked about growing investments. Those shouldn't be foreign concepts to most clients because they're already doing it. They're already making all the right decisions as it relates to retirement planning. So what happens if and when I need this for long-term care? So there are 3 tiers of long-term care benefits available. The one that I'll touch on first is that one all the way to the left. This is a variable universal life chassis on this product, but it does have a secondary guarantee, meaning no matter what happens, the worst case scenario, your account value, gets hit and goes down to 0. There's always a guaranteed minimum amount of death benefit coverage and a guaranteed 3-year LTC benefit with this plan. That's really, more impactful in the earlier years before you see policy value growth. So you see in the example here, right around years 3 and 4, there are those 2 other lines. So I'll jump up to that one on the top right. If, let's say, you're contributing $100,000 into this strategy over a number of years, 30 years later, you grow that to, let's say, $300,000 sitting in their account value. If they file a claim, Lincoln will multiply that account value by 4-fold. So $300,000 now becomes $1.2 million of tax-free LTC leverage if the client needs it. That middle line there is what I would call the what if scenario. That's really there to protect against prolonged market downturns. And how that works is as your investment value grows, every year on the policy anniversary, we take that investment value, we multiply it by 2.5 times its current value, and that becomes your what they call protected benefit. So if the markets do have a prolonged downturn, that's sort of a peace of mind bucket. In 95% of markets, it's likely going to be the 4 times multiplier that's higher. But I think clients like the fact that, yes, this is a fully guaranteed contract. It won't lapse. And my guarantees get stronger as I have positive policy performance. So from an insurance component, that's exactly how this is going to work. 3 different tiers. It's the highest of any one of those 3 benefits when that claim gets filed. Josh, did I miss anything on that slide, or are you thinking?
No, it's great. I mean, if you think about, yes, most of the time you're not gonna, but I mean, think about last year, right? If you were the unfortunate person who went on claim, let's say in April, right, when the market had just kind of crashed, then, you all of a sudden you saw some devastation to your 4 times policy account value. But that's why there's that second calculation, which is the high water mark times 2.5. So, the product is really innovative in the way it thought through, okay, listen, we're buying this because we want the growth and we want, but at the end of the day, it's a long-term care solution. So how do we put our client in the best position regardless of, what might happen over time? So again, the highest of the three calculations based off of the guarantee, 4 times the account value, or 2.5 times the high water mark on the policy anniversary. Just seems like it was well thought out.
Yeah, exactly right. And I like to kind of talk about in the context again of a planning conversation. If we're looking at, let's just compare it to a 529 plan, right? Funded to typically after tax dollars, we're growing it tax-free, and we can distribute it tax-free for qualified education expenses. We're doing the exact same thing here, except the qualified expenses happen to be long-term care. However, in this case, we have a 4 times multiplier at the point of distributing those funds. So it's almost like a 529 plan that has that additional kicker onto it. And I think folks like that message, and that message has been resonating pretty well.
Hey, Glenn, what happens if you just get hit by the big red truck, right? You die, you don't need care. What's the deal with the death benefit? How does that work? Obviously it's based off account value, but.
Yeah, so everything in this policy is driven off of the account value growth. So the death benefit with this strategy is going to be your account value plus an additional margin, which is what the IRS requires as far as a minimum amount of death benefit. So let's say in that case, you grew your benefit to $300,000 of cash value. Your death benefit would be in the ballpark of about $350,000. And again, that's a tax-free death benefit that'll get passed along.
So if you're lucky enough to get hit by the big red truck, your family gets the account value plus that margin, which is really the insurance, which is, I guess, at the end of the day, we hope we live long life, need to use the money, enjoying it, and then we get hit by the big red truck.
Exactly right. And the point to remember is with hybrid LTC or asset-based LTC, the minimum return on every single policy issued is the death benefit. Because whether you're going on claim or not, you're drawing down from that death benefit first. So, or you're not going on claim and you do get hit by that big red truck, a significantly higher minimum return on this type of policy compared to some of the other options that are going to be out there.
Cool.
Okay, so as far as who should we be having this conversation with, I'm going to start with this high net worth client because in this example, she just sold her business for $15 million. I know a lot of folks would probably take the mind of, well, if she could buy a nursing home, why would she put a plan in place if she can already afford it? And I think that's a little short-sighted because we all know that high net worth people are averse to taxes and they understand the concepts of leverage. That's why they utilize all of the investment vehicles that they're already in. In this case, she's a 55-year-old. Again, she just sold the business. So her funding is going to be a $20,000 a year, 15-pay premium. Now you might think, well, that's a little bit high, but keep in mind, high net worth clients have high net worth claims. These are folks who have round the clock care, typically by 1 or 2 people. So you're talking significant $250,000 a year to remain in home. And we know that high net worth clients, will remain in home for absolutely as long as they possibly can. So from a leverage standpoint, she makes those contributions over 15 years. At the end of the day, if we're able to get a 6.5% gross rate of return, which for this client over 30 years, I think is very reasonable, we're going to drive a monthly LTC benefit over $30,000 per month and a total pool of benefits over $2.1 million if she needs it for long-term care. And if she doesn't need the long-term care, the death benefit in this case is significantly higher, almost $700,000. Again, that would pass along tax-free to the next generation. So, for these high net worth clients, it's just as much about the taxes, the tax efficiency, and the leverage rather than I could self-insure, but if I can use the insurance company's money instead of, that 4 times multiplier, instead of self-insuring or self-funding on my own, why wouldn't I? Right.
Glenn, one thing I know about high net worth individuals, they are more concerned with returning back to regular people like us than they are about getting extra rich. So they are certainly ones who are going to self-insure the risk anyway. We show them how to do it with a little bit of leverage, and it makes sense. Now they certainly don't have to have 15, that kind of net worth to fit into that category.
Totally agree. So the second client profile, and as we go through these client profiles, I have 4 of them. Try to think of potential clients or somebody that you're seeing over the next month or two. jot down their names, and after this we can follow up, send that over to Josh. We can get some illustrations run and kind of walk through those illustrations and really how this message works, because we are seeing our sales explode with this product. I think just because the market's been clamoring for a solution like this for quite some time, particularly those clients that said that they wanted to self-insure, or they just wanted to push the conversation off. Here's a way that we can have this conversation and do so in the context of a tax planning and retirement protection planning conversation. So for this case, think of folks that are in that high income, probably don't have that wealth yet that they want to make a big deposit into a plan. Both of these clients are 40 years old. And I will say, in the 2 months that we've launched this product, I've seen more 40-year-olds applying for this and 30-year-olds, quite frankly, than I've seen in the 10 years that I've been at Lincoln. And it's because the message is resonating as far as tax efficiency. Long-term care is probably the last thing on a 40-year-old's mind when they're in the prime earning years of their career, but they're already utilizing, they're maxing out their 401k, they're contributing to IRAs or Roth IRAs. So they're investing already in those tax efficient vehicles. This is just the next logical one. And since we haven't had one in the past, I think that's why folks are latching onto it. So 2 40-year-olds, executive levels, they're both just going to do a $10,000 a year 10 pay. By the time each of these clients reaches the age of 85, again, assuming a 6.5% rate of return, their monthly benefits, over $25,000 for Judy, almost $30,000 for Don. Both of the leverage points at age 85 for the total pool of benefits is $1.8 million of tax-free LTC benefits if you need it. And on the back end, if you don't need it, your account value plus that margin death benefit gets passed along tax-free. So you're looking at just under $600,000 in death benefit that can go to the next generation or can go to whoever those clients designate as their beneficiaries. Right, the third client profile here. So this is a little bit of a different type of case study. So, trying to think of those folks who's, earning a certain level of income and can afford, maybe $5,000 a year in premium today, but expect in the future that they might be able to increase it. This is the first long-term care solution where it actually makes sense to plan on increasing premiums, because with every other solution out there, paying more in premium won't drive any additional LTC benefit. Whereas in this case, because it's driving off of the account value that we have inside of this plan, we can illustrate, $5,000 a year in premiums for years 1 through 10, and then up that premium in years 11 through 20. So she's paying in $150,000 over the course of 20 years. So for this 43-year-old, by the time she reaches the age of 85, $1.8 million in portfolio protection from a long-term care event on a tax-free basis, $25,000 a month, and that death benefit that captures the growth that she saw realized in that investment account. Again, over $600,000, which would be passed along to that next generation. And the last quick case study here is Jim.
Hey, Glenn, real quick, so the first one was, a 15 pay. The second one was a 10 pay. The next one was, like a 20 pay with where we changed the premium. I guess, what you have is the flexibility of VUL, the variable chassis, the universal chassis that, you didn't necessarily have in other products. But I think it's important to say, listen, whether the solution for your client ultimately becomes MoneyGuard, VUL, Market Advantage, or whether it's, MoneyGuard fixed, or whether it's, a competitor like a One America, or whether it's, a different strategy altogether, maybe a life product with a rider or traditional long-term care. I mean, we have all of these solutions at Alpine. And so therefore you have all these solutions. Really, the key is to make a commitment to talking about long-term care with your clients, right? Making it a part of the conversation, making it a part of your process, taking notes on your conversations, and really coming to us, myself and the team here at Alpine, and talk to us about your client. Hey, here's my client's situation. Hey, if the MoneyGuard Market Advantage is the appropriate product after we talk about the client and the situation, then we're going to recommend that. If it's a different product, we're going to recommend that. So it's really all about the client, but you can clearly see the flexibility in this product and how it's different and how we can really fit it into the bigger planning picture more than just let's hedge that long-term care risk.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean, I think this conversation, especially for those clients that maybe have looked at long-term care in the past and just didn't move forward for one reason or another, this is that, that extra value prop that maybe was missing from the sale before, whether, they like the growth in the death benefit, or, they just thought that, well, over a long period of time, I can do better in the market. Well, here's the opportunity to do better in the market, and then also get the leverage with that 4x multiplier that you're not going to get in any other type of investment. So the story is, really resonating across the board, just depending on, what folks are looking for out of their long-term care solution. But it takes a commitment to talking about long-term care to bring these types of concepts up. And I think this solution has the biggest value proposition for those folks that, before they have a change in health. So, folks in their 30s, 40s, 50s, up to maybe age 65 or so, where this solution makes a lot of sense. And I do want to touch on the fact that, your risk tolerance as it relates to retirement planning, your risk tolerance as it relates to long-term care planning will likely lag behind about 20 to 25 years from what it was with the retirement plan. And the reason is you're typically, earmarking age 65 for that retirement. Most folks aren't going on claim, in their mid to late 80s. So, thinking about it from that standpoint is, how do we want to, put that portfolio together? We have an additional 20 or so years to capture that growth before we file that long-term care claim.
That's a good point, right? Because we tend to think of everything from the moment of retirement, right? Desired retirement age. But the reality is that you're right. Average claim is 20 years after that. So, where you might think a client would be a little bit old for VUL, well, the event still has a couple decades to go. So, yeah, absolutely a good point there.
Sure. And just to quickly go over the numbers for this client. So he's 62-year-old, same concept. He's funding $10,000 a year over 10 years. I do want to point out, so those other clients we talked about, you're going to see a much bigger total pool, and that talks about the time value of money. Obviously, the more time that you're invested, the more time that you have to grow. Let's not write it off for folks in their early 60s for that exact reason, but it's a good reason to be talking to clients, earlier and earlier, because we're going to lock in their insurability for one, right? Typically, folks in their 40s have less health concerns than folks in their 60s and 70s. The longer that they can be invested, certainly the more time that they have to drive that account value up, which is going to drive a bigger death benefit and bigger LTC benefits. But even for this client, 62 years old, he puts $100,000 into it. His total portfolio protection from a long-term care event by the time he's age 85 is almost $600,000. So 6 times leverage on what he had put into it at that 6.5% rate. $10,000 a month in LTC benefits and a death benefit that gets passed on to the next generation of $190,000. So from a client standpoint, that's just 4 client profiles. I absolutely recommend jotting down some names. We can have that conversation with Josh and myself and design a plan. As far as what sets Lincoln's MoneyGuard apart, whether it's our fixed MoneyGuard strategy or it's our MoneyGuard Market Advantage, which is the solution that we talked about today. Lincoln is the leader in hybrid long-term care. And in fact, now we are the #1 long-term care provider across the board among every type of long-term care. So we have experience in the market. Our MoneyGuard solutions have been around longer than 30 years, which is very important when you're talking about clients that might be going on claim in 20 to 25 years, as far as, what is the experience, what's the track record of that carrier that you're going to be putting your clients into. And Lincoln by far has the best track record as far as how we manage claims, the resources that we provide to clients at the point of claim to make that as streamlined as possible. As far as what's covered, virtually everything from that diagnosis or that inability to do 2 of 6 activities of daily living, the care can be received in-home, all the way through every type of care setting, all the way up to nursing home care. In this product, we actually have a cash benefit available that can go to a spouse that might be providing care or another family member. We do have those cash benefits available with this particular type of contract. So just to kind of quickly recap here, why plan? I think it's vitally important that we have this conversation with every single client. Not every client's going to be ready to have the long-term care conversation, but they might be a little bit more receptive to, your income level is such that it makes more sense to be putting, whether it's $3,000 a year, $5,000, $10,000 a year, from a budgeting standpoint, into a solution that we know we're already self-insuring We just don't know it yet because we haven't filed that, we haven't had that diagnosis. So very important from a client standpoint to plan for it. From an emotional standpoint, not to put your family members to have to step up and take time away from work, but certainly important from a practice management standpoint, a fiduciary responsibility standpoint, and as far as bridging that gap to the next generation as well. Quickly recapping how this product works. Look, we're contributing money into the strategy. The whole goal is to grow that investment value as much as we possibly can over the next 15, 20, 30, 40 years before we have a long-term care event. But if and when we do, that account value is multiplied fourfold on a tax-free basis for qualified long-term care expenses. And to protect against prolonged market downturns, you have that 2.5-time high watermark policy value lock-in. If long-term care is never needed, the death benefit growth in this policy is going to be substantial compared to some of the other solutions that are out there. And then finally, why MoneyGuard? Lincoln is the pioneer in long-term care planning from a hybrid LTC standpoint. This is a game changer. It's the first of its kind solution that gives you tax efficiency and market participation, all in the umbrella of a long-term care strategy. I will tell you that, out of the first 100 applications that we got for the strategy when we launched it back in February, half of those applications were on advisors buying policies either on themselves or on their spouse. And half of those, so 25, were folks that had never written a MoneyGuard hybrid contract before. So this is absolutely the right time to be having this conversation. All of the market research after this last year of COVID is that folks are hyper in tune to the health and the changes of health that the unforeseeable could potentially pose to them. The fact that we have a strategy that we can put in place that harnesses the power of the market and also provides tax efficiency that's going to be right lockstep with what they're doing in their other retirement planning accounts just makes all the sense in the world. So it's just a matter of getting comfortable having that long-term care conversation and enlightening clients on how much it's going to cost, the emotional burden that it's going to place on their family if they don't put that plan in place.
Glenn, you make a great point in the fact that never before have people been more willing to talk about long-term care, right? I mean, in fact, the studies show us that people actually want to talk it. They just don't know who to talk to or really how to talk about it. And I think about, as I work with, let's say, registered reps who might say to me, well, listen, I've had this client for 10 years. I've never talked about long-term care before. How do I, how can I do it now? Like it wasn't important before. Or, I might hear somebody say, well, I talk about it. Nobody really buys it. It's expensive. But, I talk about it. But, it's not too expensive. And I know that because I work with a number of individuals making significant living selling long-term care solutions. The difference is the conversation that they're actually having, right? So I like to say, at Alpine, we're not smarter than anybody else. We're working with very successful individuals throughout the years that we get the advantage of seeing what works. So, if you're one of those, reps out there, if you're intimidated about the long-term care conversation, we can take the collection of best practices and we can walk you through that conversation, how to have it the right way, the professional way, right? So, there's two pieces to selling long-term care. There's the product and knowing what fits and how it works and what's suitable and identifying the solution for the client. But then it's also talking the client through the conversation of long-term care. What happens if they get sick before they die and they need to pay for it? And how do we plan for that? So, whether you're seasoned and you just want to add this product to the portfolio and maybe some of the other ones that we might have, or whether, you realize this is important, but, you're not really, sure how to go about talking about it, we can work with you regardless of where you are in the long-term care space or progression of your business. So, Glenn, I don't know how much you have here, but I think it's been, really productive, so I don't know what you're about to go. Yeah, okay, there we go. So, perfect timing. So listen, I want to thank Glenn, Steve, you guys did a great job. Thank you all for joining us. Like I just said, the world has never been more open to discussing long-term care. And I work with advisors who, when COVID kind of shut down in-person meetings, we're worried about keeping the lights on, and these long-term care solutions are directly responsible for some of the people we work with, maintaining their business through to today. So listen, I encourage you to reach out to myself, the team here at Alpine Brokers. Let's talk about clients, prospects that came to mind during the presentation, as Glenn said. We'll put together a proposal, walk you through it, make sure you're comfortable with it, and we'll show you how to move the client from conversation to application. So as I mentioned earlier, the webinar has been recorded and it will be available for viewing on alpinebrokerage.com. The team here at Alpine is available to help, so give us a call at 866-777-2006, and we are happy to help. Have a great day, everyone, and thanks for joining us.